An irony that would ring through the ages. Jack Smith is poised to charge Donald Trump with trying to rig the election, with voting fraud, with attempting to fix the balloting in 2020. Nearly all of the original reporting on what is in target letter number 2 was wrong, or at best incomplete, and I have a theory as to why and who the source was, and that the source who screwed up was Trump himself. But the headline is, Smith's letter warns Trump the grand jury was considering charges against him for potentially violating USC 18, Section 241. And if you just read the heading, you would see USC 18 Section 241, conspiracy against rights. So somebody too important to bother to read the whole thing would say, he's charging me with conspiracy. But the New York Times is reporting that the statute is actually a law enacted after the Civil War that gave federal agents of the time something with which to prosecute Southern whites who engaged in terrorism, to keep the newly freed slaves from voting, and which over the ensuing century and a half has been adapted for use against conspiracies to commit voting fraud. In 1974, the Supreme Court upheld the use of this exact statute, which Smith put in the new target letter, USC 18 Section 241, to prosecute people in West Virginia who had cast fraudulent ballots on a voting machine, and no less a figure than Justice Thurgood Marshall himself wrote that each voter, quote, has a right under the Constitution to have his vote fairly counted without its being distorted by fraudulently cast votes. And you don't have to be Thurgood Marshall to recognize that a scheme to erase the actual votes of the actual voters, especially in Georgia, where the infamous "I just want to find 11,780 votes" phone call is already being memorized by American history students, but also in Arizona and in Michigan and everywhere else Trump and John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani and the rest of them try to pull off the phony electoral slates scam. A scheme to erase hundreds of thousands of votes would violate the Constitution in exactly the way Justice Marshall phrased it and exactly the way USC 18 Section 241 prohibits. Hell, maybe they plan to charge Trump on one count for every ballot he corruptly tried to fix. Maybe he will go down in history as the man convicted of rigging the 2020 election. The Times confirmed that Jack Smith mentioned only 3 laws Trump may have broken, with the caveat again that a prosecutor does not have to list all the laws a target might be indicted for violating, and he does not have to charge under every statute he lists. This 19th century election fraud measure, USC 18 Section 241, also USC 18 Section 371, under which it is a crime to conspire to defraud the United States of America, which could be just the fake electors scheme itself, or the fake electors combined with the insurrection itself, or any of a dozen other Trump efforts to fake his way to a second term. The third statute in the letter is, as widely reported, USC 18 Section 1512, which has a clause which makes it illegal to corruptly obstruct an official proceeding, which Trump did twice on January 6th, once by the Electors scheme inside the Capitol and one by the insurrection that went from outside to inside the Capitol. The Guardian also reported the use of USC 18 Section 241 and noted additionally that if it and 371 and 1512 really are the entirety of Smith's second case against Trump, these second charges could actually go to trial before the stolen documents case does, because there are no issues of classified documents and clearances to deal with first here. And again, whoever told Rolling Stone and then ABC that the third statute in the Smith target letter was primarily used to prosecute racial or ethnic discrimination in renting, and whoever said there was a witness tampering charge had clearly just skimmed the letter. And gosh, who in Trump world is known for just skimming things? If you do not think Trump personally leaks to the media, let me introduce you to his past spokesman, John Barron, and the other one, John Miller, and, of course, Carolyn Gallego, his, quote, secretary, unquote, who wrote a letter to the editor of New York Magazine 40 years ago about how well Trump treated women and how all the women wanted to go to bed with him. Although there are not any confirmed instances of Trump personally leaking anonymously or using a pseudonym while president, he regularly brought in reporters, sometimes reporters he barely knew, into the White House to tell them almost anything. Hell, in February 2020, he told Bob Woodward more about COVID-19 than he told the other 330 million of us combined. The man is a compulsive leaker and talker. If Trump was using fake spokesmen, and if Jack Smith charges him with election rigging for using fake electors, I will give Mr. Smith $1,000 if he also finds a way to charge him with using fake spokesmen. If Trump was doing that yesterday with the fake spokesman, they sure were busy, and they sure were busy shoveling over an unprecedented string of bad legal developments. A federal judge in New York denied Trump's bid yesterday for a new trial in E. Jean Carroll's first sexual abuse and defamation suit against him, which resulted in him being ordered to pay her $2,700,000. And then he defamed her again, and she sued him again. The case did not get thrown out. Trump remains fixated on the idea that he can get out of the Stormy Daniels hush money case by getting it transferred out of local court in Manhattan to federal court because that increases his chance of it being dismissed because his bribing her was somehow part of his official duties as president. In this, I see the uneducated hand of his legal advisor. Well, let's just call him a non-attorney spokesperson, Tom Fitton. Judge Alvin Hellerstein says, hella no. Sorry. And late Tuesday, the Georgia State Supreme Court voted unanimously to dismiss Trump's petition to block Fani Willis from any further investigation into the Georgia election interference case and to throw out all the evidence gathered by the special purpose grand jury in Fulton County. So the Georgia case against Trump for Georgia continues. And that brings us back to the news about the special counsel's target letter and USC 18, Section 241. Trump's platoon of lawyers and enthusiastic amateurs have at least seen the profound danger in what he did to try to get state officials to commit fraud on his behalf and either throw out legitimate ballots and disenfranchise legitimate voters or fabricate nearly 12,000 new ballots and voters. He can get charged twice on that one, at the state level and at the federal level. But it is presumed that if Georgia really is central to Jack Smith 2 Electric Boogaloo, the Georgia case, the state case that is, will wait for the very important reason that if any details, testimony, witness recollections, evidence, whether something happened at 3 p.m. or 3:15 p.m., if anything between the state and the federal cases does not match exactly, a good lawyer or even a Trump lawyer could make that work to Trump's advantage and imperil the entire federal case. So, to recap before we move on to Marjorie Tantric Taylor Greene's pornographic happy hour, what do we know? Well, we know Trump moved on to that topic and largely dropped the prosecution from his compulsive social media posting, though he did write yesterday, "I keep on winning. Any attorney that represents me is either a fool or a great American patriot that history will love and cherish," unquote. You wouldn't want to put that to a vote, would you, Sonny? Jack Smith did not tell Trump to show up to be formally indicted in Washington today and probably didn't give him enough notice for him to show up and be formally indicted in Washington on Friday. His grand jury has supposedly been meeting on Thursdays, so we might get some action today. Smith does seem poised to indict him deliciously on charges of trying to rig the election. Crooked Donald. And there is at least some Trump indictment fatigue breaking out among his nominal defenders. Quote, "I don't even know who he's getting indicted by," said Republican West Virginia Senator Shelley Moore Capito to the website The Messenger. She also said, quote, "It's a never-ending story." Yeah, you may be right about that, Senator. On the other hand, You know, there's always more target letters where that one came from. So, House Republicans, meanwhile, were conducting this, quote, Hunter Biden hearing yesterday, which turned out to happen simply so Marjorie Taylor Greene could show off her porn collection?
To pay prostitutes, for sex to pay prostitutes.
Yes, that was not a golf club membership. That was for a sex club payment.
That was for a sex club payment. This is evidence of Hunter Biden
Chairman,
making sex. Excuse me, this is my time. Making pornography.
Should we be displaying this, Mr. Chairman, in the committee?
The lady's time has expired.
Today's hearing is like most of the majority's investigations and hearings. A lot of allegations, zero proof, no receipts, but apparently some dick pics.
The mot juste at the end there, Congressman Robert Garcia of California. And don't forget the G in Rep. MTG can also stand for groomer. The gist of this time, the secret Republican whistleblower, informant, secret squirrel witnesses were not fugitives from justice indicted for bribing Trump officials on behalf of foreign governments. However, somebody thought we ought to check.
I'd like to get right into some basic vetting questions, as unfortunately our colleagues across the aisle failed to do so with some of the previous witnesses that they called. And so, Mr. Ziegler and Mr. Shapley, I'm hoping that these are very simple, very straightforward questions, so I'd like to ask that you answer them with a yes or no answer. Mr. Shapley, are you now or have you ever acted as an unregistered foreign agent for the Chinese government or for any other government?
No.
And Mr. Ziegler, are you now or have you ever acted as an unregistered or registered foreign agent?
No.
And Mr. Shapley, have you ever participated in illegal arms trafficking?
No, I have not.
And Mr. Ziegler, how about yourself?
I have not.
And finally, Mr. Shapley, have you ever been indicted of a crime, lied to investigators while under oath, or run from the law?
No, I have not.
And Mr. Ziegler, same question to you. Have you ever been indicted, lied to investigators, or run from the law?
I have not.
Thank you for answering those questions. Obviously, it would seem strange to have to ask these clarifying questions, but given the majority's track record in calling witnesses on this matter, not to mention their own presidential candidate, it seemed necessary to clarify for our American folks who are listening today.
Melanie Stansbury of New Mexico saying hi to all the Republicans' friends in China and Russia. Her point was largely satirical, but it does underscore an important reality. Some Republicans throughout history have done the whole Joe McCarthy thing pretty well. Jamie Comer is not one of them. They just aren't prepared. The upshot of the, quote, Hunter Biden hearings, besides the, well, upshots Marge Greene was gripping so tightly in her hands. I mean, Congressman Jared Moskowitz put it perfectly when he tweeted, based on this, perhaps we should call Hunter Biden the big guy. The upshot of the whole day was an IRS investigator named Mark Shapley, who was upset because his bosses ignored his demands that Hunter Biden should be prosecuted more than he was already being prosecuted. It turned out that Mark Shapley always wants everybody prosecuted more than they are already being prosecuted, and his bosses always ignore his demands. Congressman Mo Canna.
Is it not true that the tax counsel in the criminal department has disagreed often with your decisions in the past?
Oh, criminal tax attorneys?
Yes.
And, as I stated in my...
So how often have they disagreed, in your opinion, with your recommendation decisions?
Very often, criminal tax attorneys, yes.
Can you give us a percentage of how often you've said we ought to charge someone and they've said, no, that may not be a good idea?
Yeah, I would say, just ballparking a vast majority of what we do.
I just think because you have a history of wanting to charge people and then people pushing back. By your own testimony under oath, you said about 90% of the time people are pushing back on what you want to do.
Well, to give this farce the serious attention it does not really seem to deserve until you remember that this is the United States House of Representatives, and this really is all Margie, Barney, Rubble Green, and Jamie Comer, and Byron Donalds, and Jim Jordan actually can do. It's all they can accomplish in life. Here is the whole thing explained and dismissed by, in about 2 minutes, who else but Jamie Raskin.
So what happened? Well, the son of the sitting president of the United States lost his brother and then lost his way badly back in 2015. As too many families around the country know, drug addiction is a dark and powerful affliction. And like other addicts, Hunter Biden made foolish and criminal choices, including failing to pay his taxes and owning a firearm in violation of federal law. And he's now being held criminally accountable for it. His investigation began under the Trump administration. It was conducted by a U.S. attorney for Delaware, David Weiss, who Donald Trump appointed to his office and who Attorney General Barr chose for this assignment to conduct this investigation. In his final press conference in December of 2020, Attorney General Barr expressed full confidence in Weiss's work, saying it was, quote, being handled responsibly and professionally within the department. And to this point, I have seen no reason to appoint a special counsel, and I have no plan to do so before I leave. Furthermore, Joe Biden never publicly questioned or challenged this prosecution. When it began, he did not decry it as a witch hunt by Donald Trump. He placed his trust in the fairness of the American justice system. When he became president, not only did he not use his power to halt the investigation, he kept in place Trump's handpicked U.S. attorney, Mr. Weiss, overseeing it, even though incoming presidents usually replace U.S. attorneys with their own appointees. And his attorney general, Merrick Garland, made sure that Mr. Weiss, appointed by Donald Trump, had full authority and resources to pursue this probe and charge it however and whenever he saw fit in any district in the country. And in the past few weeks, as Hunter Biden accepted a guilty plea, the president and his attorney general have done nothing to interfere with the case, which is overseen by a federal judge appointed by, yes, Donald Trump.
Thank you, Congressman. Let's give the last word back to Marge. She wraps this up by unexpectedly endorsing the many arrests of Dementia J. Trump. Are you sure?
I would also like to say that when evidence and proof of a crime is presented, no prosecution should be denied, no matter who the person is.
Thank you, Nancy Faust. Also of interest here, the president of Stanford University resigns because of investigative journalism conducted by the Stanford University student-run campus newspaper. The guy fudged a series of scientific papers. He's out. And suddenly I was flashed back to the day the president of Cornell University, who was also a scientist, only this one co-discovered an element, thank you very much, an element on the table of elements, thank you, number 85 on your element program. He and I got the airline to ground the plane they were going to put us on, a plane they were trying to repair with paper towels. I swear. That's next. This is Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Postscripts to the news, some headlines, some updates, some snark, some predictions. Dateline, Palo Alto, California. The president of Stanford University will leave that post at the end of next month because of the student newspaper. The Stanford Daily, the student-run campus newspaper, began an investigative series last fall into the research papers into brain receptors that had been written by University President Dr. Mark Tessier-Levine. Short explanation, the doctor fudged stuff in them. And when this was pointed out to him at least 4 separate times over the last 20-odd years, he failed to correct said fudges or the papers or withdraw them altogether. Easiest fudging to explain, images used in the research were altered. The soon-to-be ex-president will also retract or issue lengthy corrections for 5 separate academic papers. What you want in a scientist who becomes your university president is a practical guy, and I had just thought of this man last week. He came not from Stanford, but from Berkeley. Before the Stanford scam story came up, I was thinking about Dale Corson, president of Cornell University. When I got there, he served from 1969 to 1977. He had been in the physics department for 23 years, which came in handy in this story. Among other things, he helped design the school's synchrotron, and I don't know what that is. He chaired the physics department and was dean of the College of Engineering, and he was co-discoverer of astatine. What is astatine? Astatine is an element. Astatine is element number 85. And what have you done with your life? Dale Corson co-discovered an element with the word ass in it. I met him once, accidentally, and that's the story. It was in the waning months of his tenure. The spring term in 1977 was beginning, and I was flying back from New York City to Ithaca from LaGuardia Airport in the days when you waited for the plane in a room that had a big window in it, and about 50 feet on the other side of the window was the plane. And on this frigid morning, we were already late to board that plane, but nobody seemed to be paying much attention except me, because I'm staring at the plane. And these two guys in suits who are standing under it and pointing up towards the belly of this not very new, certainly not jet from Allegheny Airlines, or as we fatalistically called it, Agony Airlines. And finally, I see one of the two guys slap the other one on the arm, and he runs towards the stairs, and runs up the stairs and into the plane, and then within a minute, he's running back down the stairs, and he's got as many paper towels as you could carry squeezed between your hands without dropping any. I don't know how many that was, 500, 1,000? And the guy runs over to where the other guy is still standing under the plane, and he hands the other guy one paper towel off the top of the stack. And if that's not crazy enough, the other guy wads the one paper towel up and thrusts it up into the underside of the aircraft. And I say quietly, but out loud, "No, sir. No, thanks." And one by one, the first guy hands the second guy paper towel after paper towel, and the second guy stuffs them into the plane with increasing fervor. The plane we were supposed to all fly to Ithaca on, that's being repaired with paper towels. I look around. Nobody else is looking out the window. Just me. I'm William Shatner in the Twilight Zone with the monster on the wing who's trying to destroy the plane, and I'm the only one who sees this. And that's when I see the second shocking thing. Sitting across from me in this waiting room, 50 feet from the plane, smoking his pipe, his 1957 era hat firmly perched on his head, plowing through his copy of the New York Times. It's the president of my school, Cornell President Dale Corson, the co-discoverer of the element astatine. President Corson, excuse me, you wouldn't know me. My name isn't important. I'm class of 79. There's something about this plane I think you ought to see. And to his credit, the president of Cornell University begins to tell me that all the students matter. I'm just pointing out the window and shaking my head, where the second guy is now stuffing his 30th paper towel into the undercarriage of our plane. And I say, President Corson, you were engineering, weren't you? Does this look safe to you? And he stops talking, and he looks at me, and he looks back where now it's paper towel number 35 going up, and he says, "What's your name?" And I tell him, and he says, "Good work, Mr. Olbermann. I don't know what they think they're doing out there, but I can assure you of this. That plane will not be flying us to Cornell. Have a seat. I'll take care of this." President Corson began to walk towards the check-in desk, and then he stopped, turned around, and handed me his paper. "Here. We may be here a while. Read whatever you like. Just don't do the crossword." At a distance, I heard him threatening the airline and the executive they sent down to discuss it with him. And he said something about air rights over Cornell and the airport commission. And the next thing I knew, we were all on a jet headed to Elmira, New York, with the promise of a bus to take us the other hour to Ithaca. I was already on board the jet when President Corson got on, and he stopped and he took his Times back from me and he shook my hand. They think it was a problem with the toilet drain. I told them that's exactly what you want near the wiring of a passenger airliner. Leaking fluid everywhere. Blockheads. Then he asked me what my school was and what my major was, and I told him. Communications? Really? Have you ever considered engineering? And I told him my dad was an architect and the actual math and the physics and the, hard work part were the bane of his existence. Well, I can understand that. Clearly you have the eye of a reporter anyway. I guess that's some consolation. Paper towels, I swear. Thank you, President Corson. Still ahead on Countdown. Just last weekend, I talked to my old producer, the one who had to tell me one night that our MSNBC bosses had decided that we should let this Rachel Maddow walk to CNN. We didn't need her. That would have been the night I wound up threatening to quit mid-show if we didn't stop that. And also the night I wound up personally hiring her out of my own pocket for $437 in cash. Things I promised not to tell coming up. First time for the Daily Roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world with paper towels. The bronze, the endlessly gullible Maria Bartiromo of Fox. Before yesterday's House show and tell of Marge Green's collection of giant blow-up porn, Congressman Andy Biggs of Arizona, I think that's a coincidence, Andy Biggs blow-up porn. Anyway, Biggs went on her show and decided, hell, if we're making up out of whole cloth this claim that the Bidens took millions from other countries, let's do this thing big. Maria, we're talking literally, it's not $10 million. It's well over 20, 30 million. Some estimates as high as 100 million flowing through these accounts. To which Maria Bartiromo could only reply, hoey moey. The sad part is, even if somehow that were true, $100 million to the Bidens, that would be 1/20th the money that Jared Kushner just got from Saudi Arabia alone. Just him. The runner-up, Dan Cox, the Republican nominee for governor of Maryland last year, who was trying to succeed a retiring Republican governor, and he lost 64-32. Well, a congressional campaign committee with Dan Cox's name opened up. He said he had no idea who had done it. It wasn't him. The Daily Beast reports it was him. Dan Cox had hired a treasurer to launch the campaign and then changed his mind, forgot about it, remembered that he'd lost for governor by 2-1. Who knows? But the winner, Philip L. Buchanan of Florida. This is, by all accounts, the Twitter account Cat Turd, the right-wing nut job who whores himself out for Trump and the fascists and does unscientific reader polls, which he then positions as actual political opinion surveys, and who is unswervingly convinced that his IQ, which is about 75, is the highest in the world. Turns out that in the hour before he revealed he had gotten another Target letter, Trump reposted 4 of Cat Turd's witticisms, and the spotlight was apparently too much for the old turd. Why me by Cat Turd, he wrote. I'm exhausted mentally and physically. This Cat Turd thing has been a 5-year roller coaster ride. I basically work 7 days a week, no days off, no vacations. I don't even know how I got here. I often ask myself, why me? This goes on for 571 words. Dude, you tweet. You are not Christ fresh off the cross. You tweet. We all tweet. Sounded like Cat Turd was quitting, but not to worry. A cheer-me-up bouquet of tweets from General Michael Flynn and Senator Mike Lee, and Buchanan was ready to get back out there and meet them at the barricades. Flynn and Senator Lee and Cat Turd. Do you remember at least hearing about those paranoid fantasies from the 1960s that the Russians were behind putting fluoride in all the water systems because fluoride would make the next generation of Americans stupid? I'm beginning to wonder about that. Cat Turd. Remember the old joke about self-martyrdom. No matter how hard you try, you can never hammer in that last nail yourself without some help. Today's worst person. and Noah! Paper towel! Just ahead, I talked to the executive in question literally over last weekend about something unrelated. But the sound of her voice brought the whole thing back to me anew. It was the day MSNBC would have lost Rachel Maddow to CNN, but literally I hired her with all the cash I had on me so she wouldn't go to CNN. I did keep $5 to tip my driver that night because our bosses thought there was no way she'd ever succeed as an anchor. I swear. Things I promised not to tell next. First time to feature another dog in need you can help. Every dog has its day. Over the 4th of July holiday, they found Fizz tied to a fence on the Grand Concourse in the Bronx. 53 weeks old, terrified, but then loving, but now becoming more and more aware that they mean to kill her soon at the New York City Pound. She's 45 pounds, tan, an ordinary street mutt with one brown eye and one ice blue eye, and she could be adopted today by any home where the kids are 13 or older, or our pledges can help the rescue save her. The New York Pound continues to be a nightmare of overcrowding, and if Fizz is going to get out alive, it's going to have to be very soon. You can find Fizz on my Twitter feeds. Pledge if you can. Your retweets will also help. Fizz thanks you. And, of course, I thank you. Late in November 2007, after several months of pressuring my MSNBC bosses to hire Rachel Maddow to try out as my guest host, with a goal of then showcasing her and spinning her off into her own show, the vice president in charge of the network, Phil Griffin, agreed to give Maddow a deal for $40 or $50,000 as an MSNBC contributor. It would do nothing more than lock her in place so that CNN would not steal her from us. I mean, I knew that conversation and that concession still would not get her own show, but what I did not know was the concession I was told about, the contributor's contract, it was a lie. And by January of 2008, as the Clinton-Obama primary race turned into a tongue war, we were imposing upon Rachel Maddow to join the desk each Tuesday for primary night. She was not anchoring. She was not even the lead analyst. And my uncontrollable fire hose co-host Matthews was consistently pretending that she did not actually exist. But she existed. She was there. And I quizzed her about every topic, every chance I got. Soon, I began to include her appearances in the pre-recorded open that I would write, 2 minutes of hyperbole that was really designed merely to give everybody enough time to get my fat ass into the anchor chair and everybody else's mics on. With Tim Russert in the NBC News Washington Bureau, David Gregory at Clinton headquarters, Howard Feynman and Eugene Robinson in New York, Chuck Todd at the exit poll desk, Tom Brokaw at the perspective desk, MC Escher at the lack of perspective desk. Then came Super Tuesday, February 5th, 2008. I was writing this orgasmic drivel, as I always did on Tuesday, crossing the names of who was where off the list as I went, the list handed to me by the executive producer Izzy Povich, when I noticed the list did not include either Rachel or the Rachel desk. I knocked on the wall that separated our little offices at 30 Rock, and she shuffled in, complete with a sincere smile of friendship, but always also with what seemed to be a little space kept in reserve where she could wonder if I was mad enough to try to take somebody hostage. Yes, my third child? Where's Rachel tonight? I asked as I waved the paper at her, assuming oversight, but leaving my own little space in reserve where my earlier nightmare had come true. Not on paper. Please to put name Rachel on paper. Izzy Povich said it matter-of-factly. Oh, yeah, well... Oh, I was in trouble. That elongated consonant always meant trouble. She's on Larry King tonight. Momentarily, I went very stupid. Well, how in the hell does that work when she has a contract with us? I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to hate me. The Izzy Povich fake cringe and crouch ensued. Phil made me promise not to tell you. Rachel doesn't have a contract with us. He told me he told you he'd get her one. Then his boss refused to give him the money. I'm sorry. You promised not to hate me. Momentarily, I was calm. Momentarily. But why didn't you tell me that before approximately, right now? Why didn't you tell me this before she agreed to go on Larry King's show? Well, she only decided this morning. Apparently, she really needs the cash. I told Phil, and he said, those are the breaks, buddy. The last thing I actually remember doing, the last part that I did not need to recreate from the memories of others and an occasional flashback in therapy, was asking how much my old friend Larry King was going to give Rachel. Izzy pursed her lips. $250. I remember screaming that figure several times, along with all the swear words I knew. I remember vocalizing, we are going to lose Rachel Maddow, the next great talent of cable news, to effing CNN for $250 effing dollars. Everything else after that statement is darkness. I know I phoned Phil Griffin and threatened him. Izzy recently confirmed for me that I asked her to leave before I called him and threatened him. I believe I warned him that if he did not sign her to a contributor's contract within 24 hours, I would walk off the set during that night's primary coverage, or maybe the next week's, or maybe during Countdown tomorrow night. It would be a surprise. I'm also confident that I warned him that of all the talent on television, Larry King had the best knowledge of what and who else would succeed. More than the rest of us combined, he was a savant. And when he saw her in real time on his primary night panel, we would never see her again, and she would have a CNN contract before midnight. I told Phil that when that happened, I would then kill him with my bare hands. Or Jeff Zucker would kill him when she wound up beating the hell out of us in the ratings. This statement all took longer than this paragraph would imply because I know without fear of contradiction, every other word out of my mouth was either what we used to call an oath or the phrase, Jesus H. Christ. Mind you, these people, the president of NBC, Jeff Zucker, and it's a year since they got rid of him at CNN, the president of NBC News, Steve Kappas, and the soon-to-be president of MSNBC, Phil Griffin, these had been the same people who about a year earlier had decided that their 10 p.m. host, Tucker Carlson, yep, Tucker Carlson was on MSNBC, that Tucker Carlson did not need two people to play the role of liberal foil on his show at like $50,000 a year. So they kept one of them. His name was Max Kellerman, and they fired the other one. Her name was Rachel Maddow. They fired Rachel Maddow at MSNBC to save $50,000. She was back now at MSNBC only because my producer, Izzy, had suggested making her a regular guest, and within a couple of months I realized she would be the next great host in cable news. And after months of pleading, including pleading with her because she didn't want to do it, I had just convinced them to put her back under contract, except they had lied to me and they had not put her back under contract. I may have mentioned this to Phil Griffin during our phone call. 111 different times I may have mentioned it to him. I also telephoned Rachel. I did not swear at her. Here, every other word out of my mouth was not an oath, but an apology. I said I had genuinely believed she was already being paid, and I was not only humiliated on behalf of my network, but that I was far more humiliated that I had not double-checked with her that they'd actually given her the contract they told me they had given her. I begged her to please, please, please don't go on CNN tonight. I did not ask her to skip out on them and return to us unless she thought she could pull that off gracefully and with a clean conscience, but just not to go on with Larry. And that's where I added the little $437 stunt. I'm sorry about the money situation, I said. I didn't know. Now I know. I can only do this. I think they will give you $40,000 or $50,000 for a contributor's deal, just to start. But what I will do is, And while making as many sound effects of exertion as I could dream up, I stretched around, I pulled my wallet out of my back pocket, and I emptied it onto my desk. I need to keep $5 to tip my driver tonight. You can have the rest of whatever cash I have on me. I'm counting it now. There's 100. 20, 20, 20. My play-by-play skipped no bills. $442. American. 5 for the driver, the rest for you. $437, Rachel. Deal? She laughed. I'll see you tonight. I'll just tell Larry I couldn't be disloyal to you. Oh, and I will take the money. And she took the money. In point of fact, when I like to say anything that Rachel Maddow did with her career after we got her show on the air in August of 2008, that's all her doing. I have nothing to do with that except being the lead-in for the first 2 years. That's true. But I also like to say that I got that show on the air. And I also like to say I hired Rachel Maddow at MSNBC, and this is my point. It was not figuratively, it was not metaphorically. I hired her out of my own pocket. I hired Maddow at MSNBC for $437. And I will point this out again. I never even got the $437 back. I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. Here are the credits. Most of the music was arranged, produced, and performed by Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, who are the Countdown musical directors. Guitars, bass, and drums by Brian Ray. All orchestration and keyboards by John Philip Chanel, produced by TKO Brothers. Other Beethoven selections have been arranged and performed by No Horns Allowed. The sports music is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2. It was written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc. Musical comments by Nancy Faust, the best baseball stadium organist ever. Our announcer today was my friend Stevie Van Zandt. Everything else was pretty much my fault. Don't forget, Countdown is now also available on YouTube with and without astatine. That's Countdown for this, the 926th day since Donald Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Hell, arrest him again while we still can. The next scheduled countdown is tomorrow, bulletins as the news warrants. Till then, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.